Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh, yeah.
Well, Rob, here we are. We survived podcast movement, and we are in process of switching data streams. So I literally unplugged the Ethernet cable to the Mac Mini and put you on Wi-Fi to Starlink. So I may need two cables on that Mac Mini to be able to switch. And so having you on Wi-Fi is not the best solution, but here we are. And but I've been seeing 300 down and about 20 up on Starlink lately. So speed-wise, it should hold.
Yeah, it should be enough. Yeah, it should be enough to handle this.
If the latency isn't bad enough.
It doesn't appear to be bad. I think it was worse when we first started talking, but it's definitely better now. But yeah, podcast movement wrapped up, and I think that there's some interesting takeaways from what we saw there, isn't there?
Yeah, and probably there's a lot of people listening. I had taken a picture. People, the show hall wasn't even open, but it didn't get much better from the time I took the picture to. Well, I guess let's just talk about it. And Dan and Jared, if you're listening, please listen. It was a different event. It felt completely different.
Yeah.
It felt like we were in LA again. At an industry event. Not at a creator podcaster event.
I've never really felt, Todd, much of a difference between the two of them, actually. I mean, I guess that's... So let's be clear what we're talking about here. We're talking about the Evolutions event that typically happens in Los Angeles at about the 6-month part of the year, and then it pops over to the main podcast movement event is what just happened. So the one we're talking about is the one that just happened in Washington, D.C., August 19th through the 22nd. And it was, the 10th, I believe it's the 10th time that event has been held, that main podcast movement event, which has held the mantle of the world's largest podcasting conference for many years. But I'm not sure that it's up to that level anymore. So it's really kind of, there's a lot of stuff to unpack about this topic. And, I was there, Todd was there. We spent most of the time at the event and saw a lot of stuff that is concerning, right?
Concerning.
And nothing to take away from the efforts that Dan and Jared has put into the event. I think they've done a terrific job of organizing it and pulling it together and doing what they need to do to keep the event moving forward. But I do think that what we're seeing, and we're going to dive into it a little deeper, is really coming out of what's happening with the industry of podcasting. And it's coming out of the economy. It's coming out of people's attitudes towards podcasting. I think are all part of a shift that's happening right now. And I think podcast movement is a very stark reflection of that. Would you agree, Todd?
Well, I go to the event as an exhibitor.
Yeah.
And we measure success of a show based upon the number of, I know when we go there, we're waving a flag that we're still in business, we're still here. So there is a cost associated with basically saying we're still here, we're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is the who we're talking to. And this year, the number of people, fresh creators at the event was horribly underrepresented. I mean, it was bad. We've pulled the spreadsheets. We scanned every person we talked to. And I will say this, under 10 new podcasters that we talked to over 3 days. 10. 10. That number should have been closer to 100 or 200. Because I went and looked at previous years. I've done, and looked at our data. That tells me that new creators, there was plenty of existing creators, but
Right.
new creators were not there. And I think we attribute it to maybe 3 things. Shows on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Cost.
Yeah.
And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and cost. And it's who is a new creator that is exploring the medium, that is trying to get started and wants to go to an event to find out information, airfare, hotel, expensive a ticket, and PTO. It's just too much. I know what our costs are. I think we probably had $2,500 per person by the time you get done. Well, more than that, after the time you get done with food.
Right.
So there was a lot fewer participants. Now, what really made a difference, and again, the exhibit hall was immensely oversized. And there's a certain dynamic to trade shows. And I hate to do a trade show 101. I've been doing this 20 years. But when and people are going to laugh when I say this, but when the aisles, when you have a booth and another booth across from you that's 10 feet away, there's kind of a dynamic that happens. When people walk down the aisle, you can say, hi, good morning, get their attention. And oftentimes they're more or less, you kind of pull them in, right? And
Yeah.
that is just a thing that happens at trade show. That's a trade show dynamic. The aisles were 30 feet wide. So I couldn't yell, hey, good morning, and get someone's attention. So the dynamic of just being able to, having the show floor being so spread out, just from a layout standpoint, impacted exhibitor traffic, which I care about. Now, if you're an attendee, you could care less about exhibitor traffic, right? Well, it's my job to get them into the booth and talk to them and raise awareness. That's all fine and dandy. But when you handicap me from the beginning of the 30-foot aisle, not to mention no carpeting on the floor, and people don't want to stand because their feet hurt.
Right.
And people say, why are you worried about the carpet, Todd? It's a big deal. If you make the aisles smaller, the carpet bill is smaller. You have 1/3 less carpet to put down when you shrink the exhibit hall. So you have 1/3 the cost on putting carpet down when you don't have this big expansive area. I'm not telling Dan and Jared how to do their business.
Well, I think what they were doing was probably doing the right thing for kind of the business side of the event. And also I think I want to say too that I think that they did at this event what they needed to do, right? And I think that is another sign, the lack of carpet on the floors,
Yeah.
the fact that they had 6 presentation stages that were on the exhibition floor.
On the floor.
Right, which was good because they did have, those wireless headphones that you could wear to
Yep.
actually hear the presenters, which
But-
is we've experienced doing
Yeah.
a live version of this show at conferences can be a challenge where people can't hear each other and it's hard to actually do content in that
Yeah.
kind of environment. So I think they did acknowledge that they were going to have an issue,
Yeah.
but just the expansive space that they had at this event tells me that they were thinking that this event was going to continue to grow every year and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so they got this contract with Gaylord, and all of those hotels are very
Sure.
large.
Sure.
And they're very professional hotels. They're
Yep.
very nice. They're perfect for a show that's growing,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
a show that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
The problem that we ran into with this is that the attendance of this, from what I gathered from others that were looking at the Swap Card mobile app, was that there was only about 2,000 attendees, which, on the surface of it doesn't sound like that's horrible, but I think when you compare it to, let's say, the event like 3 or 4 years ago, it was probably over 3,000, right? So you're off by about a third on the attendees, and I do kind of wonder if it's creators was making up that difference,
Well,
right? And so you have to, kind of look at what's happening here
yeah.
and really, really back up and look at the aspects of what's going on in the industry too. I think that it's a multi-layered thing, right?
But
It's not,
it's not just one
and it's not,
thing.
it's not Dan and Jared's fault in some
No.
ways. I mean, it's definitely kind of a reflection. I know that those guys went through some tough times during COVID, right?
Sure.
Where they were trying to put an event together, and they were having a hard time getting people
Yeah.
to show up to those events too. I think at one point I think they had like 1,000 people.
Well,
But that's understandable. But now I think it's a different dynamic now.
Yeah.
I think that the industry is professionalizing. It's not seen as a medium that is as easy for people to build shows and create shows that are successful. And I think the big takeaway from this is that I think it's also a clash of expectations. Because I think you and I have seen the past,
Right.
and we have an expectation that we go there because we both worked for the hosting companies
Yep.
in the past, and you in the present, and I think what we have always seen and what we expect is that there's going to be new creators there, there's going to be business interests there, there's going to be commercialism there, the radio companies are going to be there, but what we're seeing happen now is really a shift towards professionalism, towards the bigger shows getting more attention and more audience and getting more monetization. I think there's examples of that I'll share later in the show about what was in Pod News over the last couple of days about this big show that was signed $100 million deal with the Amazon Wondery folks. And it's just a reflection of how kind of disconnected big podcasting is from the 80% of
90
independent podcasters.
90%. Hey Rob,
Yeah, or
bump
90%.
your audio just a little bit on your side. One thing that was a tell really for me, and what was interesting was that one thing's for sure, the amount of traffic, the amount of people. So I took all our data, we exported everyone we talked to, and I broke it into really 3 categories, 4 really.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for people that we see that really have just friends and family.
Yeah.
People that are basically potentially new podcasters, those that are podcasters, and potential business prospects. And the number of folks that were talking to me looking for money for different events and things are going on was a huge part of it. There was a lot of existing podcasters that were looking, believe it or not, to move. We talked to more people about migrating this event than anything. So if all the people that talk to us that want to migrate, it'll be a little bit of a savings grace, but that still, we'll see if that actually pulls through. And then, and you always expect to get 1 or 2, success for me is 1 or 2 really big deals out of a show. And I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to get a big deal out of this show. And again, as an exhibitor, I have a little different perspective, but at the same time, I heard speakers who were speaking at the event, they were complaining because they weren't getting any feedback. The little speaker they had there was, they're used to having in-ear feedback, and so they're on a mic dry talking, and they were having a little bit of challenge in that regard. So I'm sure the speakers will get feedback to them to, hey, boost that feedback speaker up a little bit. The attendees to the sessions probably did well because they could hear really well because they were dialed in with those headphones. So I think that was a success from that standpoint. But
unless you're wanting to get questions from the audience, I don't see it's a big challenge. But
it's some sort of feedback that they were complaining about. But for us, we've had a 10 by 20 now for 3 or 4 years. We downsized. We went back to a 10 by 10. So did Podbean. They went back to a 10 by 10. Red Circle and Buzzsprout were there. They've always been in a 10 by 10. So I'm sure they'll be back with a smaller booth. But really, there's no need to have a big booth. And we're going to reduce the number of people we take to the show for the following year. And the only thing I'm going to say is Podcast Movement can't rest on their laurels. They have to go out there and work and promote this show in order to bring a full spectrum of podcasters back to it. If they don't, I'll have a hard consideration to make a year from now.
Yeah.
Be honest with you. And I understand that the large percentage of people that were there were chasing 1% of money. They're all looking, a lot of people were looking for deals.
Yeah, it's a business.
Yeah.
I mean, there were, Spotify, the ESPN folks, which is part of Disney, had their own private rooms.
Private
upstairs
rooms, gated.
and didn't have any exposure
None.
to the public event at all. And there's other networks that did the same thing up there, I saw. So, it's really turned into something quite different than I think.
It's
Dan and Jared
an
started out
elite
with this event.
it's an elite club.
Yeah, and to kind of double down on the thought that I had around expectations is that I heard some say that, exhibitors, what I'm talking about is that some of them that are doing well, right, in the industry, they're still doing well, they're not struggling, are increasingly looking at this event as just a thing to do to connect with their existing customers.
We've done that for years because we know the
It's
ROI is
not
going to be
an
different.
ROI, right?
Yeah.
Motivated situation because they realize that this event is not going to drive much of an ROI. So, so in some ways it's an investment spend that you can't really expect a strong ROI on.
But when Road is there, not Road, who is there? One vendor left because they sold nothing. And when there's
before the event ended,
yeah,
is that what you're saying?
they left a day early. Well, they didn't exhibit on Friday. And when there's
It's so slow on Friday, there's no reason to be there.
well, it was actually, believe it or not, we had good traffic on Friday. The traffic we had stayed steady when it was, but I didn't need 3 people. I just needed 2 at the max.
Yeah.
So
it's only a half day anyway on the final day.
yeah, so it's like 4 hours or something, 3.5 hours or something small. It's not that many. But the simple fact that, so I know one vendor, the only reason he was there was because someone said, hey, you can piggyback, you can be in here with us. So, if you don't fill the exhibit hall, that's a problem. Then the event is going to change. If the exhibit hall isn't there anymore, and you have very few vendors showing up, then it just becomes, I don't know what it becomes. And I understand the contracts in these devices. Oftentimes you get the exhibit hall if you guarantee so much in food and beverage. It's all this, they're between a rock and a hard place because they play this game, the way all these big convention centers, and it's never to the advantage of the group that's holding the event. Doesn't matter who it is, because of the big numbers they have to pay. So I don't envy them at all. But maybe to help this summer event, something has to change too. Let the corporate come in on Thursday and let them go home on Friday. And then Friday and Saturday have a focus for people that want to come at a cheaper price. Let them, because the ticket price is another thing is keeping people away. You look at the podcast show in London, they have daily sales. You can go.
So it's a 2-day event and they sell 1-day tickets.
And you don't have to go to the sessions. You can just walk and the exhibit hall's packed wall to wall. And they tell you the difference
I think it is their model, right? I think it is a little bit of their model is what's getting in the way right now because I'd say that the ticket prices are over $1,000
If you if
for
you
Pro
if you
Pass.
if you
Right.
get it late, if you get it earlier, it's cheaper. But
Right.
I've got people saying, "What show?" And also, here's another
Yeah.
key thing. It used to be, "Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from LA. I'm from Washington D.C. I'm from Colorado. I'm from Arizona. I'm from Alaska. I'm from Europe. I'm from blah 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 blah." Washington D.C., Washington D.C., Washington D.C., Washington D.C., New Jersey, Washington D.C., local Virginia, Maryland. I mean, I had only talked to one person, and maybe it's just based on who I talked to, came from Seattle. So it's a regional event now. It's not a national event. So they did
Yeah,
not.
it's just expensive to travel, and
Yeah. But
they
airplanes are full though, Rob. So I don't necessarily give that an
well, there's
excuse. But
fewer flights.
yeah,
That's
well,
the other thing that's going on.
but
So it may not be an accurate reflection of how many people are actually traveling. It just may be that the airlines are trying to be more efficient.
oh yeah, Adam say you're not monitoring Boost today. I'm sorry. I have failed in doing so. 10,000 sats from Adam Tree said, "You should have yelled, 'Yes, Queen!'" And I don't know what that's referred to. My Facebook page is going, my YouTube channel is going crazy here. Meta says, "Walking from one booth to another was a marathon. Had to stop and rest." Beauty Bubble, an idea. We may have to return to the buddy system or dance card environment. Every attendee should declare who they want to meet and know what they see to happen from that relationship. Randy says the walled garden approach is going to hurt podcasting in the long run. Adam says not monitoring Boost today. Beauty Bubble, should everyone not be required to be on the conference floor? Well, everyone was on the conference floor. That's just it, because they had all of the sessions on the conference floor. Podfather in the house. Yes.
And plus that's a cost savings too, which means that they didn't have to acquire as many session rooms.
Yeah. Adam, thanks for joining the troll room.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to still, okay. As I said, in a boost to Curry and the keeper, happy birthday, Pod. Okay. I'm just reading down through. I was at PM to look for job prospects. Clearly bits and knits cometh. Yep. You have to meet your, oh my God, these guys are having fun in the chat room. Keep going. Say something productive when we want to, and we'll cover it in the show. But hey, I don't know. I just call me the old curmudgeon, and I have to go back. This is the thing. I have to go home to my board of directors and have to say, here's the numbers. Here's the numbers. But I started this session today, and maybe Rob, we can quit bitching about the show. We can talk about some of the cool things that happen.
Yeah, or things that are reflective of the broader scope of what's happening. And I think this event has been moving towards this for many years now, moving toward the business side of podcasting.
Yeah.
Right. The ad sales, the deals, the brands, and being basically a place for people to go to have business meetings.
Yeah.
And try and
if you're on the
create
invite
deals.
list, yeah,
Right.
to get into the room with the shrimp and caviar and the
Yeah, and it's a battle. I mean, at a very high level, it's a battle over the big shows, right?
Right.
To some degree. I mean, not all big shows are there, but they may have representation that's there from those big shows. And they're all battling over representation, which ad sales agency or which hosting platform or whatever will give them the best deal. I had some conversations with a few people around ad guarantees and things like that. Well, I guess that's happening still, but just not at the level of 100%. It's typically like maybe a 30 or 40% guarantee
But
type of
again,
type of a
Rob,
situation.
those people aren't listening to this show. So, to be honest with
Well, I
you,
don't
does
know if
anyone
that's true
care
or not, Todd? I mean, it's just reflective.
Yeah.
Of, economic situations about what's going on with podcasting. Even the big companies are not investing. And this was another thing that came up a lot in my conversations with people, is that the bigger companies are not investing in creating new shows right now.
Yeah,
what they're doing is they're increasingly doubling down on the ones that they have. And we are seeing in the stats where audience continues to grow.
Yeah, audiences are growing.
Is that most of that growth is going into growing the pool of bigger shows.
We see great growth on shows, just average shows.
Well, sure,
right
it's
now.
going to happen other places too, but I do think that the big is getting bigger right now, and I think that's kind of a bigger kind of trend line right now. And then the focus on that, if more brands are focused on a smaller number of shows looking to do ad deals, there's this tension that's been creating, and I'm hearing it at places like Oxford Road and some of these, that ad loads are becoming a concern. I know we've talked about that many times.
We've been talking about that for 2 years.
Yeah,
so.
Right, and that now the agencies are saying, well, if your podcast has more than so many ad spots in it, we're going to lower our CPM offer, right? So we have this tension, right, that's happening around ad loads and ROI on campaigns that are going into these really big shows, right? And I see it at platforms like Spreaker. I mean, they have this programmatic stuff that they're doing out there, that their platform is capable of like 13 minutes or more of ads an hour in their content.
Well,
right? So it's this tension around commercialization of the medium, and then we also heard kind of backdoor conversations around what's going on with video too, and we can.
Well, one thing I'll tell you, who wasn't there, YouTubers. They weren't there. YouTubers did not attend this event. So, and there was some,
because they're all going to Vid Summit.
Yeah, well, there was some tempering on YouTube. There was a video finally got a little bit of a drawback. Maybe it isn't the end for all that you were thinking. But I want to bring up one thing before we get there and lose half the audience, because we talk a little bit about video. Of course, we're on video.
No, I wanted to talk about the tension at the event over video and how Tom Webster pulled it back to audio again.
Well, and that's my point exactly. So I named this show in the restreaming service as, let me look at it here, Does Podcasting Need a Got Milk Campaign? And everybody knows what Got Milk is, right? You probably saw them on TV in the 80s and whenever that campaign run. You got milk? And they showed a milk jug, right? Or someone drinking milk. Got milk? And I think we need a Got Milk campaign.
What are you going to say in that, Todd?
Well, here's something that Tom hit on, and he nailed it on the head. The thing we have forgotten, the thing we have absolutely forgotten, and I should pull up the Slack channel because I talked to my team about it actually in a meeting, and I posted some stuff from Tom. Podcasting in the audio is a companion. It's companion content.
Sure.
You take it with you. It's in the car. It's on the train. It's on the bus. It's at the gym. It's companion content. It's lean-in content. Okay. We have forgotten, and we need to start promoting again that audio is your cup of milk and your cookie at night. It is something that is wholesome and pure and non-obtrusive. We need something to remind people of what podcasting is and the pure form of the audio. It's getting overridden by, the screen time counts. We have to remember that audio is, and Tom is, and I didn't make this up. This came from Tom in a subtle way. Tom Webster.
Tom Webster.
Yeah. And so we need to advocate as a podcasting community the value of what podcasting offers. Let's quit talking about the bullshit advertising. let's talk about the value of this medium.
Those conversations go to two different audiences, but so I do think that the advertising side is something that does impact listeners. And I do think that that's the core tension that's going on in the medium right now, is that who is this medium trying to cater to? Is this medium trying to cater to brand advertisers, or is it catering to trying to grow listeners? Or
well, it's
better community relationships with listeners as a longer term strategy to advertisers. Because I think as we've seen this shift happen increasingly, as we've been pushing ad loads,
well, we haven't
higher and higher. I'm talking about the industry. That we are moving away from being a medium that's focused on building community and building audiences, and more towards catering to the wishes of brands and advertisers.
Well, that's what people are doing. They're rolling over and dying on their swords because they're basically to the advertisers. Now, Adam, another 10,000 sats boost, less ad loads, more boost loads. Yes, go boost. Podcasting 2.0. And we hope you're listening on one of those. We are live and lit today, so I hope that you're listening on one of those new podcasting apps from podcastapps.com. My personal favorite is Fountain. So hope you're listening. You can listen on a podcast app if you didn't know that, and we are live and lit. So there is a drawback. Tom said in his presentation, of course, he's given more input today, and I shut it off about 5 minutes before I met you here on the online system. That there's some pullback, and we know that. Blueberry knows that. We know where
from what?
Oh, the creator side.
Oh, fewer
creators. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And everyone smiles, business is great, and then you get people in private, and they're having a conversation. By the way, I always disclose I did get to talk to Ted from Apple. So Ted, you just found me via the transcript. I know you tuned in at this point because he told me how he finds out if we talked about him.
He just searches for his first
I
name.
shouldn't say his name anymore. We should just talk about it and force him to listen. And I've shared with this audience already. My advice to him was Apple needs to quit making video be a second-class citizen. And why? And we've been doing this show live for as long as we can remember. I think for 13 or 14 years at this point. And the number of people I actually counted. So from the start of the show to the end of the show, when everyone talked about video, I said, "Oh, you want to watch my video podcast on Apple Podcasts?" And they look at me, and I would bring it up, and I would click it, and I would show the video on Apple Podcasts. Now,
people would know it's there.
Their jaws dropped open. I didn't know that. How's that possible? Really? That's there? How long's that been there? I said, since the beginning. So I think the number was 13 that I was able to have an enlightening moment with. So if these are podcasters been in the biz, these aren't new people. We even had a fun discussion on the podcast index. People were blaming, "Oh, you shouldn't. You're sending your audience over to Apple." No, they started on Apple because what year did YouTube get online? I don't even remember. I was doing a video podcast, I think, before there was YouTube.
I think it was 2005.
Oh, maybe not. So anyway, if I'd have started on YouTube, I'd probably be rich and retired, Rob. But yeah,
they were really quick to the medium. I mean, they saw something happening and jumped on it right away. I have to give Apple a lot of credit for
but
their forethought.
Let's surface it so that we can see it, and Ted, to his credit, thanks for the input, and Ted plays the Apple role very well, and he listens to input. And surprisingly, I think he listens to a lot of podcasters complaining too. And so, I'm sure that can be tiring, but I just, I think the Apple team as
No,
well.
I think we're the ones that are probably the most vocal about it because we've been around long enough
Yeah.
to know that it's there. There's a lot of new people in the industry that don't know Apple supports video
Yeah. When I
on their podcast app.
and to be honest with you, I never had to defend Apple before, and now it's one of these things that, I have to defend Apple quite a bit. And, and Apple's not everything. We've got, this show alone, I think we're like 46%, 47% of folks are listening on Apple. The rest are on different apps. So there's lots of great apps out there at newpodcastapps.com. So lots of options. But I think that, what was I going to say? Oh, I had a great lead in and I lost it. I'm having a senior moment here. But anyway, go ahead, Rob. I'll think about it in a second.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that it just came out in Pod News, and thank you, James Cridlin, for that. I guess Lipson reports that they've hit a new low in Apple Podcast downloads. I guess they're showing it down to 46.7% of all downloads for shows on their platform.
Yeah, we're about 47%. That's about where we're at.
There's a slippage going on there.
Well, they're moving around. It's not that people are listening. Our Spotify numbers are absolutely, are bad. For the record, Rob, I took Geek News Central and Podcast Insider off Spotify. So I wasn't going to remove this show off Spotify without getting your permission. Because you got 50% investment here. So what do you think? Should we remove this show from the layer the Dragon's Den? Oh,
probably not. Just because we're trying to be an industry
yeah, I know.
podcast, right?
Yeah.
So trying to boycott certain entities in the podcast space maybe doesn't reflect well on us on that side.
I'm not boycotting. I'm just
right.
choosing where I want my show to be.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
Well, anyway,
I'm not sure what's the percent. Is there any way? I'm sure there's a way you can look.
Yeah,
up
I can
what
look
the
it up.
Percentage of audiences over there.
It's maybe 1.5 or 2 or something like that. But okay. I will say this: you'll find this interesting. Buzzsprout's podcast isn't on Spotify.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? So, I made the command decision to join the club and pulled the Podcast Insider from Blueberry. And also, we weren't getting any numbers over there anyway, so it didn't really matter. But, so. Woohoo!
But Todd, to kind of back up to this video versus audio discussion a little bit and kind of dive a little deeper into that is I think we are feeling this internal tug of war in the industry, right? It's like, oh, do we really want to go down this path of video and kind of, embrace it, or do we want to push back on it and become or remain what we've thought of ourselves as audio only, pretty much. And that's a little bit of my takeaway from Tom Webster's presentation too. Mm-hmm. It's like, he's been pushing this topic of the importance of video and things like that. But I feel like maybe it's a little bit of an industry thing to do, is to kind of follow what the broader needs of the industry are and tell them what they want to hear? Or is it really looking at the trends in the market and reflecting what we need to do going forward and accepting that? Or is it just because we built the infrastructure of this medium so much around audio that's the appropriate position to take?
Well, I liken it to fly fishing. And I've never fly fished, but I know people that do.
Right.
If they aren't biting on one lure, you put another lure on. And you throw it out there and see if you get a bite. So it's a shiny object thing, and something new. It's whatever it is, whatever the hotness is today, will be something else tomorrow. Podcasters and me alike have chased those shiny objects in the water and thinking that this brand new thing is going to bring success, when in the end, it really boils down to really only one thing: sustain superior content. If people get bored,
Yeah, I agree. At the end of the day,
yeah,
that's true. I do think that this conversation isn't quite as, not just you and I, but what's
yeah,
happening in the industry isn't at the level that it needs to be. Because I'm not sure it's a black and white issue, right? It's for many content creators, doing video is something that they primarily do, right? And
yeah,
increasingly, I'm hearing on big video podcasters or video YouTubers or whatever are announcing on their shows. And I think it's an interesting trend that they're about to launch their audio podcast, right? So I'm hearing these big content creators starting to recognize the fact that they need to have an audio version as well, right? So you have kind of two things going on here. You've got these big video creators realizing that maybe they're missing some audience by not doing an audio version or an audio podcast, right?
that's why our pod to vid has met
Right.
and exceeded all KPIs.
Right. So I think there's a shift going that way, but then there's also, audio first
Yeah,
content creators that are, building some success and growing, but they're saying, well, what if I do, let's say, one live show a week, or if I do a bonus video content that's additional to what I'm doing with my podcast, right? That might be a way to engage community and engage their followers at a deeper level, right? Or to have some audience engagement. So I think that this conversation gets a little too siloed around audio versus video, when it's really what's happening in the market is these things are blending together. And even Tom's research that he shared with us is that increasingly people are consuming this content in both mediums, right? So if they can watch it, they will watch it. If they only can listen, they'd like to listen. So catering to the needs of the listener is really what this industry needs to be focused on. And I'm not sure that we're having that detailed of a conversation about it yet.
well, we've trained this audience because they watch on Apple Podcasts. 20% of them do.
Right.
So
I know you and I are on board with this. I'm just saying that, because you're taking your company and you're positioning it to be, a cooperative platform for those that want to create video too, as a way to capture their audio to create an audio podcast. And I think that's the right way to think about this.
At the same time, part of the argument that I had on one of the Mastodon chats was it's too expensive to do a podcast via an RSS feed. So,
what a video podcast?
Yeah,
via
yeah.
RSS feed?
Yeah. So, I basically have, I kind of hinted at it. We're going to do something where we're going to have, our pro users have been able to do video since really we've been hosting. But really, it's still, they have to pay for bandwidth if they go over a certain amount. And, if you have a super successful show, it can get good. But I'm willing to go on some risk at this point based on what I'm paying for bandwidth and knowing that probably the majority of shows are not going to get a huge amount of traffic via RSS video.
Via video.
And some will. And those that there's always some outliers out there that are going to make me, I'm going to choke on the bandwidth bill. It's just like my petabyte customer that's moving a petabyte of data into Nigeria. That one, I pay a little premium for that data to go to Nigeria.
Yeah.
And a petabyte. Now that's some data for when you are getting a per gigabyte bill from your provider. There's a lot of zeros there. So, but that's what the game you play as a host is. You pray you don't get a petabyte user, but at the same time, that petabyte user helps you get a lower rate. So it's a love, it's a love-hate thing. Right. So the bandwidth thing, I think at this point was 5 years ago. There's no way I could have financially afforded to do this at risk. And now there probably is. Why do I want to do it this way? Well, we have to, because someone has to stand up and say, hold the line. Hold the line. It's like World War II. Hold the line. Because, if regardless of not, if things continue, podcasting will be on YouTube and will be on Spotify. And hosting companies will go extinct. And then guess what you will have? Dictatorship and monopolies that control your media, control what you say, will ice you out because you said one wrong bad word. And then there will be a lot of people left self-hosing and be a last man standing. And it's going to like, so we have to hold the line at this point. And it's not necessarily for business survival. We're not at that point. But we also have to do a better job of educating content creators. We're here to help you. We want you to succeed. We're providing great tools for you. Go ahead and go over there and just be on a platform and be blind. This is why we need a Got Milk for podcasting to make podcast listeners understand why audio is important.
Though I think the problem with that is that you're not being very future looking with this medium.
Well, I am being future
focusing just on audio.
No,
the research is showing is that people want to consume both, at different parts of their life.
Yeah,
right?
We have to re-educate. It's like the 55 plus crowd that's underserved right now, and they mostly listen. They don't mostly watch.
Yeah, and it's okay to start playing a video and put your phone in your pocket and just listen to the audio too. So there's kind of, I mean, not that everybody's going to do that.
Who's going to do that?
Well, I guess it depends on what your preferred consumption platform is. Do they support video? Do they support audio? Do they have both? If they don't have both, if they don't, and this is where the podcasting 2.0 initiative comes into play and is really important as you look to the future, is that the conversations we need to be having with audiences is not around format,
right,
or if it's audio or video. It should be the content. It should be about the portability of the content. What's different about podcasts versus mainstream media? We should be drawing contrasts to get people more into podcasting. But the problem is we can't seem to get our hands around really as an industry and embrace specifically what a podcast is. Because we're getting pulled all these different directions in perception.
I'm not going to try to define what a podcast is, but I will tell you this.
Well, you're going to have to do a Got Milk campaign.
Well, it's about this lean in engagement. It's about companionship. It's again.
Well, that's my entire point, right?
So
is what is this medium's message that will drive what?
But
what are we trying to drive? Are we just trying to drive more listeners?
Absolutely.
Or viewers?
And we also we need to continue to promote the value of audio. And if they want to, we'll have to say, if you want to watch on video, go look on your big screen.
Right. But I wouldn't discourage people. See, this is the other part of it too, is that as we look at RSS, and one of the reasons that we're here is because we walked away from RSS-based video delivery.
We didn't walk away from it.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
I'll defend it.
We have.
I'll defend it. We've been supporting it from the get-go. We advertise it.
Okay, but supporting is different than promoting it.
Oh, we promote it.
So, okay.
We have
3 companies in the podcast space right now that support video. That's it.
Well, good. It gives me lots of opportunity to get business.
That happened in about 2008, 2009, where the industry started pulling back from video because they just gave up because of YouTube.
Well, they gave up because it was hella expensive. It was and I was in 2008
that there weren't valid reasons.
In 2008, I was paying a dime for a gigabit. A dime, 10 cents a gig, and in this show alone, it would have cost like a dime to deliver this show to every listener. So, of course, no one could afford it. But bandwidth doesn't cost a dime no more.
Right, totally, and that's another argument for why do we continue to focus on just audio? let's focus on what the consumers want, which is audio and video. Because I think if we keep doubling down on audio,
Oh, I'm not
we're
saying.
going to miss. No, listen,
Yeah.
Todd. We're going to miss the arc of the interest of the listener, right, or the viewer, and miss the opportunity, and invariably drive people to YouTube and to Spotify to consume the video.
Well,
And if we don't, as an industry, kind of say, well, we're going to take back video via RSS and make it open and make it not proprietary, not as proprietary, then that gives us an opportunity to hold on to RSS. Because if we just hold on to audio in RSS, I think that the industry is under threat.
it's not in threat from listeners because I'm looking at the monthly stats report and I'm still delivering 300 million plus audio listens a month. And
okay, I'm thinking like over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay,
right?
well, again, all the
as-
audiences are not
as
going to
people
abandon
shift
it.
more,
And I don't
more
think they're going to abandon audio podcasting for video. People that
I'm
listen
not
want
saying
to
that
listen.
they're abandoning it. I'm saying that the interests of the newer generation is trending, and you're seeing
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
research, is trending more towards video.
Until they get a little
Audio
older.
well, that's what we've always said, is that thank God for podcast listeners as they get older, because then their interest in different types of content change too.
Well,
So at least that's been the history.
video is not the savior of podcasting. Let's just put it that way. It is a companion content to podcasting. There are bigger issues at play than just video.
Well, I think it could be the savior for RSS, because then
Savior
then
for RSS.
our-
RSS is not going anywhere, Rob. Come on now.
No,
You've drank a little bit too much of the YouTube
No.
Kool-Aid.
no, it's not about YouTube, Todd. I'm talking about video as a content medium. I'm not talking about.
Well, the
YouTube.
problem
I'm
is
talking-
then is, okay,
what
so
I'm talking about is the audience wanting the content that they're increasingly wanting, and that's audio and video. And if we silo RSS into just audio, then we become just an audio medium, which isn't embracing, and it's leaving the door wide open for these other proprietary platforms to take over the other half of the industry, which is video.
well, they are already doing that. When you have
I mean, you just made my
well,
point, Todd.
but the thing is, you're going to have a hard time. So I don't know. I don't know what the future is, but I'll say this:
Well, it's
here's
podcast 2.0, the alternative enclosure,
yeah.
and the audio. So you have both available to consumers. right?
Listen to this, podcasters. We can't say who, but I think you actually came to me with this, Rob, right? That a certain
What's that?
advertising firm is telling their podcasters, maybe you weren't the one, but anyway, I thought you were the one that came up and told me this. A certain advertising firm that shall remain unnamed is telling their podcasters to no way in beep, beep, beep to have their video override their audio on Spotify. They say separate.
Oh,
Because guess what? Guess what?
yeah, the stats.
Well, no, this is
stats went down.
beautiful.
Right.
50% less listens or watches when the video was primary. The audio, let's say the audio version of the show was getting
No,
1,000.
no, Todd, you're portraying it to fit your position.
Oh, absolutely.
That's not what was going on here. So what's going on is there's a bug in the metric system. that
Or is it?
tracking?
Is
Yeah,
it
it is.
bugging? So they're getting 50% less views according to the reporting right now than they are on audio, and it's a bug.
Yes. Yeah, but I wouldn't draw any specific conclusions on that, because it could be caused for other reasons which haven't been determined yet.
Convenient.
Well, no, it's not convenient. It's
Well,
there could be a technical problem. There could be a UX.
well, then
problem.
if they're telling their podcasters make sure they have 2 listings, there's obviously this has been going on for a while, and there's panic because they're
Well, it
not making
doesn't-
as much money.
Yeah, just because one implementation of this wasn't done right doesn't destroy the concept of it. I mean, the actual concept of having both there, we've talked about in the podcast medium for a very long time, of having audio and video in an item in an RSS feed, right? And having that as options for the consumer. And that will directly compete against YouTube and these platforms that want to be video only, right? Because we're able to offer audio and video at the same time, and to present that. And I know that there's a lot of discussion in the industry, and it happened even at Podcast Movement, where all the hosting companies got together and talked about this. Everybody's thinking about how to do something better with video.
Well, good luck, and good luck on the bill on that. Randy says the younger generation are the ones who want to play video on the dashboard of their cars while driving. That's probably true. Adam says our bit
Well,
rates.
at some point, yeah. I mean, at some point, that's probably going to happen.
Our bit rates are so low, there will be only be older listeners in a few years. Our birth not bit rate. Our birth rates are so low. It's true. Sound Off Media says some things to consider about the lack of content creators at PM24. We have made podcasting easier than ever. Free hosting, AI, posting those easily recorded videos on YouTube. But are those folks getting any traction? 99% no. Plus more networks and representative creators, and in the other factors Todd mentioned, and why would a creator go? Beauty Bible says we're young in contrast to the years we live, and everyone here more than likely are playful and kids with our curiosity and wisdom. Adam says, I don't podcast for money. I podcast for Jesus. People are having fun in the chat room today. So keep on trolling, Adam. Go ahead. It's fantastic. And again, I think going back,
I'm all in on RSS.
Me too. It's like that Second Amendment thing. Take my RSS out of my dead hands. But that could end up that instead of dead, it could be bankrupt. That could be the word. We're okay, but I'm just, we have to be realistic here. We have to, protect this space and evangelize, at least on the podcasting side, the values of open RSS. And it's often lost on people in a big, big way until Todd, this is the email, Todd, I was deplatformed. And I'm like, sorry, I need to get my show up on podcasting. Great. Because they figured out that, or an episode gets deplatformed. And, we won't talk about the company that I haven't got any this week. So it's rare that I haven't got any deplatformed episodes. But the other thing that's more crazy is why aren't the podcasters that we inform that their content's been taken down, and we tell them, why don't they squawk? Why aren't they on social media screaming bloody murder and making a story of it? I don't know.
Is everybody scared to do such things on social media?
Well, yeah, people are afraid to, think they're
That's a whole nother kind of subtext to this open medium of podcasting. Is that
yeah. So, Amazon had a booth about 800 feet long at Podcast Movement, 30 wide.
Who did?
Or was it Amazon, or was it, who had the big booth?
Sirius XM.
Oh, yeah, Sirius. They came to the show like it was NAB. And I have no idea how much that thing cost. It was probably $500,000. I don't know what the booth cost. It was a lot. And I don't know what they were doing, to be honest with you. I saw some signs, and they had one thing on their sign that said indie podcasters, and I kind of giggled over that one. But they had a massive booth there. And but we know where Amazon was. Amazon was spending money on this $100 million 3-year contract with Jason and Travis Kelce, who I don't even know, didn't even know they had a podcast, to be honest with you. I don't know who they are. So,
yeah.
Are they celebrities or what are they?
A I don't know that much about them either, and I think that speaks to the generational differences, Todd, between us and them.
Yeah, so I'm gonna open up I'm
So
gonna go to the book of knowledge as I'm stealing that from the from
right.
the from a certain show called No Agenda. Who are they? Oh, they are Kelsey brothers. I may have seen these folks at some point.
Yeah, so the big news was they signed a $100 million deal over 3 years, and it said the deal included rights to create international audio adaptations. Which basically means that their podcast is going to be
Oh,
translated into German,
you know why I don't know this?
Brazilian, and Mexican language, or Spanish.
Yeah,
Right?
the key was up to 100 million. Adam just refreshed us that, so it's up to 100 million. So here's the reason: I'm not a football guy.
More,
They are
it
they
says
are
on Pod News, it says more than 100 million.
yeah. Well, the presser is worth up to 100 million. It's agreement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's the PR folks did a good spin on it. So of course, now that I've kind of got some context, Jason
Oh,
Kelsey's from the Philadelphia Eagles and Travis Kelsey from the Kansas City Chiefs. Isn't he the one that is dating
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift? Okay, now
Yeah.
so now I'm tuned in. Oh, see,
Yep.
I don't watch football, so
I don't either. So
so everyone's like screaming at the top of their lungs. You don't know who that is? Once I read the name
plus, I'm not a Swiftie either. I'm not a Swiftie.
so
It's
yeah,
okay.
so those of you that are like saying, "Are you stupid?" Well, yeah, I don't follow celebrities, so
Yes, I think that the Amazon folks were counting on the show being successful because of the connection with
of course,
Taylor
because of Taylor
Swift,
Swift.
and expecting four
Yeah,
and a half times the audience than what you would normally get
yeah.
just because of the relationship.
So again, here you got a celebrity already because they are NFL superstars,
Player, right?
and they got that money. Not your average Joe podcaster. Joe podcaster,
Well,
guess
this
got what? Zero. Got a big
and
donut
none
hole.
and none of those folks were at Podcast Movement. That's for sure.
That is for sure.
So we can't do this episode and not talk about kind of the elephant in the room
Hang on one
from
second.
Podcast Movement.
My show is on track to make 1 billion this year. That's
Wow.
what someone just said in the chat room. It's on
Okay.
track to make 1 billion.
On track. This year
Hey,
or
Rob, we're on
10 years
track
from now?
this year to make a whole $1,000.
Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, so the kind of wow moment that I had at Podcast Movement was at the keynote the
Oh,
first day,
yeah, that
which
I didn't
was
go to that.
yeah, so the first keynoter, right, I can't remember the first or the second.
By the
I
way,
think the
I've
first
ordered.
one was, and it was Stephen Bartlett, who is the host of a podcast video show on YouTube, very, very popular, called The Diary of a CEO. And I've watched his show on YouTube quite a few times. He does a terrific production of his video show, and I guess he's doing an audio podcast too. But his presentation to the audience was really indicative
Yeah,
of this bigger trend of the professionalization of podcasting.
Rob,
And I think
Rob,
that
how many people do we
what
have on staff? You and I.
65.
No, how many people do we have on staff?
Oh,
Zero.
well,
2.
I mean, just for this show.
Yeah, for you and
just
me,
to-
we have 2, right?
right.
Okay, so CEO of a diary has how many people on staff?
65.
So Adam, you do a show with John C. Dvorak. How many people do you have? Well,
On
I know
staff.
how he's going to say. He's going to say thousands because they do. They have producers. So they have
Right.
people that contribute to
Yeah,
the
but
show.
those are listeners, right? that
But
are
no, they're
participating in the-
producers. They're not listeners. They're producers. So be careful. You're going to
Well,
upset
that's
Adam. They're producers.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, yeah,
Yes.
so he's a very, very large content creator, has millions of people watching his show. He does a really interesting job of teasing his content at the beginning. He's very focused on trying to deliver that necessary, hook at the very beginning of a video on YouTube that is so mandatory now, where you kind of drive, the audience to look for questions to be answered by posing questions without answers at the beginning of the show. So he has this kind of video intro for each of his shows, and he was very specific about embracing this concept of failure as a stepping stone to success. Now, when I say embracing failure, he has a guy that he hired who's dedicated, whose focus, his job title is Chief Failure Officer.
One of his
So
65 people on staff.
Right, exactly. His
Yep.
whole job is to look for elements in his production or his publishing or the distribution or monetization that would be considered to be not meeting expectations, right? That are failing in some way or need to be optimized. And he goes through all these processes, and I do think that Mr. Beast does this as well, and that's why these guys are gaining so much success, is that they're very analytical about analyzing what they're producing and how they're producing it and what the experience is.
Speaking of which, I sent you a present, Rob.
You did?
I did. I went on Amazon and I
Right.
found a CO2 monitor, and I've shipped
That's
that
what
to
this guy
you.
said he uses.
I've mounted
Oh, you
I've
did?
shipped a CO2 monitor to your house along with it's being delivered in a few days, a 500-pound oxygen tank, so that when your CO2 levels get just a little bit low, you can feed the room a little oxygen. Now make sure you don't have any open flame or anything like that in your studio or in your house,
Right.
because we don't want you to go boom. But yes, we're making sure your CO2 levels don't get too low. Now I live in the country, so there's no CO2 out here, right? Because I'm only competing with
Oh,
the cows farting.
right.
So
Yeah, just the cows farting, right. All that methane, my God.
but
that's
this
the
guy
worst greenhouse
measures
gas.
CO2 in the room and stops the interview if it gets too low.
Yeah, then he has to ventilate the room to get the CO2 out of it, get more oxygen in there, because he gets better interviews, he says. Because the guests that he has in there will perform better if there's a higher level of oxygen in the room,
So
which
we,
actually technically is probably true.
marijuana at a certain stage in life needs 1,400 cubic meters per something, of CO2 for them to perform better, and then a certain stage of growing weeds
Yeah,
like
but if you're a human, you don't want to be in that room.
right. Yeah, the weed loves CO2, but you go in there, it's probably not good for you, because I think
It's
normally
probably
it's
not good.
670, whatever the number is. But what was his actual number? Do you remember?
I think he was talking about over 1,000 parts per million. He sees a drop off.
How many?
In guest 1,000 parts per million. He sees a drop off in guest performance.
If you have a room that's getting 1,000 parts per million, you've got an issue already.
Well, you do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his point, right? Is that it needs to get down probably closer to 400 or something like that, and he'll get peak performance out of his guests. So, which actually is closer to outside environment,
So,
which is in
but
the 300 to 400 range.
but let's in no joking. Here's the thing: where's another sign of things are out of touch? You've got an event where you have whatever the number was of podcasters there that are chasing 1% of money, and you have a keynoter that talks about their 65 people on staff.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I can
That's
relate.
what's going on over at YouTube, Todd.
I
And-
can
and
I, I can relate. Yeah, 65 people on staff.
well, and that's part of what we see happening over there is that
Those
big,
they're big.
big companies really are being birthed over there. Again, in the early days of YouTube, there were big companies that were focused on YouTube as well, and so now we saw a pullback for a few years, and now it's been individual creators that were doing things with YouTube, and but we're seeing as we move away from the era of mainstream media, right? People are increasingly moving over to getting their news and information from digital sources. I think YouTube and those type of platforms are going to continue to accelerate in their growth.
So something
That's
near
what's
and
happening.
something near and dear to your heart. You should actually talk to Adam. He's starting. I don't know the details. I just heard a hint of it. He is starting an initiative, working with someone to really local podcasting. And again, I know that much, and you'll have to. He's
that topic came up at Podcast Movement too. I've been increasingly hearing that as well around the potential of local podcasting now that we've reached a certain penetration of sorts of audience in the market. That was always what held back local podcasting, was how many people in any given locality would be open to listening to a podcast, right? That was always the gatekeeper, and that's where radio kind of occupied that space, is that historically more local people listen to local radio than they did
but
podcasts,
they've
right?
given it away because they went to full automation, and maybe they have someone on drive time. I'm just being a little snarky today, so I do have to. Are you ready for a new microphone?
Am I ready for a new microphone?
Yep, and I'm expecting to be able to be on the list to get one of these gold Curry One microphones. The Curry One. Yes.
Well, I had this mic since 2009.
Well, so I'm going to put my name on the list for a gold Curry One, and
so Mr. Curry is getting his own microphone now,
yeah, it's his exit plan. So we have to help him with his exit plan because we're all getting older. Adam just recently had a birthday and turned the big 60. Of course, I beat him to it by a couple of months, but the Curry One.
Right.
Well, Rob, in all reality, you can retire anytime you want. You're just hanging around for the fun of it.
You think that's what's going on? Okay.
I think that here's what we really, really have to do, and this is just the crux of everything. We just got to keep creating great content. People need to create great content.
At the end of the
doesn't
day,
matter if it's doesn't matter. They're not going to watch video or audio. If it's great content, they're going to watch or listen.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's the bottom line, really. At the end of the day, and increasingly, I think that's what's happening. Is that the bar has been raised, Todd, whether we like it or not. I mean, there's a lot of tension out there right now between, let me say, authentic, real kind of, rough grassroots content versus this very polished stuff. And I heard this was a few months ago that even Mr. Beast, who's notorious for creating highly produced, type of video, talking about this, saying, he's just gone too far down the rabbit hole of overproduction. And so maybe there's a balance coming between stuff like we do here, Todd. It's very authentic. It's very organic. It's very real. It's not, polished and with lots of transitions and explosions happening behind us and stuff like that, which is what you're seeing on the video side increasingly, as people are, being very provocative. They're very focused on controversial topics, maybe being a little negative, maybe, constantly talking about things that are going on that are going to end the world and things like that.
I will tell you this though too. I think that the failure rate of content creators, in other words, those that are doing podcast, YouTube, whatever they're doing, I think the pressure's heavier on the YouTube side, because once they get a little bit of garner of success, then they're married. It's okay. So if you're a farmer and you're a dairy farmer, those cows are going to be milked twice or three times a day. They have to be. Those cows got to be milked. You don't have a vacation. You don't have someone that's come in. Your vacation to Hawaii is being canceled because you got to milk those cows. YouTube is about feeding the logo, and content creators over there have to feed the beast, and the beast is the YouTube beast. And if they don't feed the YouTube beast, they're not recommended. They fall out of favor. They lose their audience. They lose their income. Whereas in podcasting, there's none of that. Yes, you should publish to a schedule, but your audience is not going to give, if you've been published long enough, your audience is not going to give up on you if you take a week or 10 days off. They're still going to be there. You can feed them with supplementary content. It doesn't have to be brand new polished content. So I think the machine of YouTube is going to cause people have heart attacks, lose hair like I've lost mine, which come from advertisers, believe it or not, and raising 3 girls. And then I think that really is going to be the Achilles heel here. You're not going to do you know of anyone besides some super duper top folks that have lasted 20 years or 18 or 17 years over on the belly of the beast over on YouTube? How many shows have lasted that long? So I think the ability for audio creators to have longer sustainability because of less production, less pressure to create content needs to be something we have to talk about. I remember my good friend Andy McCaskey, and you know him, Rob.
Yeah.
He was doing slash dot review news, a daily show, 20 minutes.
Right.
He lasted, I think, 3.5 years because the pressure was so great to produce a show every day. He burned himself out. That candle got snuffed, and he's never come back. And he had a great show making big money in the early days of podcasting. Big money, big money. And in comparison, but he couldn't sustain it. So he pulled the plug. So I think the pressure to do great, if you're going to feed that beast over there, I think there's an incredible amount of pressure to stay relevant and keep producing. I don't know if that's sustainable for a long, long time. If I was relying on, if I had to feed the Alago over there, I'd have quit. I'd have quit. Too much pressure. And that's what you hear from.
But I think that's going to come to podcasting too. I think that there's a lot of people in the podcast industry that will tell you that they're envious of the recommendation engine that YouTube has. So there is some.
Well, the recommendation. Go ahead.
Yeah, this gets back to a little bit like we've talked about in prior episodes around metrics too. Advertisers are wanting more listener player metrics, right? And this is going to play into this model that they're going to look at YouTube and they're going to say, wow, look at all the data that we get out of YouTube. Why doesn't podcasting have that level of data?
Well, good luck.
And that's what the industry is going to be. I think these bigger platforms are going to feel pressure to do that, especially ones that are focused on advertising. Now, granted, if you look at Apple is not focused on advertising. So I don't think Apple really cares that much to have an algo that is really positioned to share that level of data. Right.
So by the way, do you know how many people Rogan has on staff? I didn't know this, but our beloved Podfather does because he's been on the show. Do you know how many staff people Rogan has? Take a guess. Give me a number.
I've always heard that it was maybe about 3 or 4 people.
2.
Okay.
2.
Yeah, I thought that. I mean, he must have a liaison with Spotify.
Well, I'm sure that's probably one of the 2. But if you have 2,
him and his producer, I think has been his companion for years. It's the same thing with Mark Maron. I think Mark has been a 2-person team for all these years.
Can you imagine paying the salary of 65 people? I know what it costs to pay Holy shit. I know what Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So think about the pressure that guy's under. If you got 65 people on staff, let's just say a medium income. I mean, low. Let's go 40 grand a month. And just do that number. And not all those folks are making 40 grand. He's got people on his staff that are probably making 100,000. His bill, his good Lord. I don't have 65 people on my team at Blueberry. We hover between 15 and 18. So, and I know what that cost us annually. That's a big number.
Yeah.
Especially when you have developers that are, developers are not cheap.
Yeah. And given that we saw Stephen Bartlett as a keynote at Podcast Movement is maybe a sign that those big YouTuber creators are increasingly looking to podcasts for them to capture that market too. Because he did say up on stage that he felt that currently today, podcasting feels small to him.
Oh, I would, I'm sure. It depends on his audience size. Would you call Rogan's audience small? So.
No, but Joe Rogan is doing something very similar to what Stephen Bartlett is doing.
Well, he wasn't up until recently because he wasn't allowed.
Well, he is right now.
Yeah.
Because of and I do think that this is indicative of the trends that we're seeing.
In the next 10 years, there can only be 4 or 5 Joe Rogans in the podcasting space. There can't be. There will not be more than that.
Well, it depends on what scale you're talking
about. We'll have smaller creators, but Rogan's been king for how long? 5, 6 years? 7?
Yeah, but he's not going to remain the largest forever, right? He's going to get older and he's going to get replaced by
we'll see.
Somebody like a Stephen Bartlett.
Well, maybe.
Who knows, right?
Who knows?
And that's the bigger trend line.
And if I was Joe Rogan, I'd be putting every penny I could away, and then when I got tired of doing it, I would say, "Okay, we're done. Thank you very much.
Exactly what
go retire."
Sure exactly what.
But guys like him though will get bored, and he won't retire. So, it's like me. What if I retired? What am I going to do? Go play shuffleboard? Yeah. No.
Well, yeah, I think to some degree the same thing has happened to Mark Maron too. I mean, Mark's not in the conversation as much anymore around the big podcasters and stuff. I'm not sure.
How old is Rogan? I don't know. Let me use the.
I think he's in his probably his mid 50s probably. But yeah, I mean, I'm not hearing much about
57
Mark Maron anymore.
57. Most people don't know who he is.
Right. And increasingly, I know that Adam Carolla is still out there doing a show and is popular, but he's not as big as a Joe Rogan or probably even a Stephen Bartlett now, because Stephen is internationally.
Mark Maron's 60 years old.
He's 60. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so at 60, we get put to pasture. Is that what happens?
No, I would. Well, I hope not. But that's. But I mean, eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's just the natural tendency.
Or we die. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Google doesn't know how old I am, which is funny. I'm not important enough.
Yeah, I saw this article with the title. It says, "Podcasts used to be ad light oasis."
Yeah, whatever.
Not anymore.
We are here.
Some hosts, right. Some hosts and executives worry ad creep will hurt the medium for both listeners and marketers, says this article in the Wall Street Journal. Oxford Road's Dan Granger, who has been a guest on this show, is quoted as saying, "This is not going in a direction that's going to end well for any of us." So that gets back to the ad loads.
Well, and it's you're talking to one of the main movers of advertising, and it's his own fault. He's allowed it to happen instead of I don't know. Cry me a river of tears. I don't care.
Well, this is. I mean, you have to think of it from his perspective. He's an ad buyer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's the one that's been buying deep. So cry me a river of tears. Well, shouldn't have been loading the content so much. Should have been going deeper.
No, I'm not sure that you're seeing it how I'm seeing it. This is the position that you would take to try and get better ad rates.
Well, it's a race to the bottom anyway. So
it's a way to say, all those publishers out there, you're getting into the danger zone, and if you're going to talk to us, we're going to dicker you down on CPMs because you're overloading your content
It's
with ads. That's the message that comes out of this.
Here's what I learned in 2005. They could have hired me, did a little consulting thing. In 2005, my hour and 10-minute podcast could do one ad spot at the beginning to my beloved sponsor, GoDaddy, and a second spot midway through, which at the time was Citrix GoToMeeting. We did very well. Audience didn't complain. Audience numbers continued to grow. It was good. But boy, as soon as I added that third spot, and this is when audiences actually provided feedback and didn't actually click off and go somewhere else, they howled bloody murder. And I learned that my show could do two. Two was the limit. And if I did three, the audience started to leave. The problem is these podcasters, the audiences don't care enough anymore to provide feedback. So guess what they do? They just leave. They've got the first minute of the show listened to, so they get the ad count, but the listener has left, and guess what? They're not engaging in the ads. So, it's just like a certain political show that I tried to listen to, and it was like on my seventh or eighth ad, I said, I'm done. I didn't even hit 30 seconds. I just bounced. Whereas I was talking to someone the other day, so we just fast forward through ads. We just click, 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 click. Oh yeah, I just click, click, click. That 30, and I'm in the car. That 30-second advance button's fantastic. So we keep missing though, the real thing here. We can do. We've talked about it a lot of times on the show. Ads are not everything. There's other ways to get support for your show. Time, talent, or treasure.
Yeah, and Todd, I wanted to share the screen with you here really quick too.
Let me get you ready here.
See here. So we've got. So I talked to a fellow at Podcast Movement who was there. I believe he's an attorney, but what's going on here is that this is an article that was written by David Oxenford, who does a blog called Broadcast Law Blog, and he comments in here. So this was just published just a day or so ago. It says, "This week I spent some time at Podcast Movement's annual convention this year, held in D.C. While the convention is always a good time to catch up with industry friends and spot new trends, AI was, of course, a topic that was discussed on several panels, and it was virtually, it's in every media conference these days. And it also is a reminder of what's going on at the FCC around other regulations. And I guess what's recently happened is that the FTC has put out a notice about, as the title of this article says, podcasters and broadcasters disclose sponsors.
Oh, so just between,
this is an interesting topic, right?
Just between you and me. Go ahead.
Right. Well, yeah, I just wanted to set it up here a little bit more. It's just to say that podcast industry has always had its best performance around sponsorship and endorsement, and when it's been able to blend content with the ad, right? So this is, where the audience kind of transitions between content into ads very, very smoothly without any kind of disruption. Now, I know when we launched, dynamic ad insertion, you can still do that to some degree, but then we started to move towards kind of more hard breaks kind of scenarios.
Yeah, bring your face back to forefront, Rob. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. And so this is what is kind of interesting about this. The FCC is finally starting to, crack down.
There's been rules for this forever, so they're now just going to start cracking down?
Well, I think there's some new ones. I think that there was a new law passed here recently.
But it's not laws; it's a regulation, so they can enforce.
It's a regulation of
Yeah.
sorts, right?
Here's the thing. It's where they really need to go after people is in some of these Facebook groups where the same person is
Right.
in this thing hot and heavy and promoting the same thing again and again, and they have no financial. They're not. And it tells me you're getting paid to shill. You're not disclosing it. I don't know how you ever catch those people.
Right.
Yeah. Shillers, because boy, there are a number of them in a variety of podcasting groups that I know for sure are getting paid to shill. They're too what's the word I want to use? They're too persistent. I think that's the word. And I've actually called a few people out over the years, and some of those folks have quietly disappeared, but
So I guess there was a
so,
Federal Trade Commission final rule that came out this past week on this topic. And that's what this is here. So you can find it if you do
there's a
search.
lot of, where this probably originates, there's a lot of people that are shilling product on TikTok and a variety of different places and not disclosing. They're getting a paid endorsement, they basically are getting a brand lift deal of some sort and paid a certain. I've been offered a lot of those deals where, hey, we want you to talk about our product and we'll write you $1,000 check. And I'm like, okay, for the record, I disclose. Well, we don't want you to do that. We just want you to talk about our product. I'm like, I don't do it. But there's, where there's one of me that says no, there's 1,000 people that say yes. They've been surviving off a cup of coffee donation, and someone comes in, and because you got 5,000 people watching your TikTok videos, they say, hey, talk about or wear our clothes. Or, my daughter has my two grandchildren are big time in basically getting clothes from manufacturers. And on her Instagram post, every Instagram post where she shows the kids, she discloses that are in there, and she says she gets probably 75% less deals because she discloses on Instagram. So people are being marketed to left and right, and they don't even know that they're being marketed to.
Yeah, and I shared another kind of view of the actual FTC kind of ruling on this that has the whole summary and all that stuff. And what's interesting is the headline on this really encapsulates kind of a multi-dimensional kind of view on this, and it's regulation rule on the use of consumer reviews and testimonials.
Oh,
Now,
that's, yeah.
there are elements of this that fall into like fake
Amazon
Yelp
reviews. Yeah.
fake Amazon product reviews, and there's whole companies out there. I've been approached by a couple of them. I like going, to work for them to say, all you have to do is go in and give a positive review of this product and this product, and this one will pay you so much a month, or a week or something like that, to go in and post fake reviews of products. And I just won't do it. And it's just a matter of, this is what it's going after, is that, that's why it's so difficult to trust reviews on product websites. And it's kind of the same concept with podcasts too, or, product review videos, that kind of stuff, is that you have to be transparent about this stuff. And I think they are going to start cracking down on this stuff.
It's not as bad as it used to be, but I used to get literally by UPS would drop 4 or 5 things off every day. And I ended up with one room that just had boxes of product. And, and I would, on my tech show, on Geek News Central, I would do product reviews, but I actually did a real product review. And my rule was I have to have it. I'll use it for, if the product was substantial enough, I'll use it for a week. I'm sure all these airlines he flies on is glowing. You watch one guy, he's give an airline review, and the next day this other guy then is like, where were you guys on 2 different flights? And
yeah, he's flying around the world.
Yeah, did you so it's good that they have to reveal and disclose.
Yeah.
But
and it does
until the
fit
FCC
podcasting.
until an FCC guy goes after someone, and they're gonna have to go after someone big to make an impression, but small people are just going to continue to fly under the radar. I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. But
yeah, it's this blending of content with ads or sponsorship or whatever is and to some degree that's increasingly happening even at Podcast Movement. I don't know if you notice that or not. But
in which regard?
Well, so having whole sessions that are populated by people from one company.
Yeah.
So, which I thought in the past was not what Podcast Movement allowed to happen.
You and I have been pretty hardcore over the years. Whenever I go and do a session, I talk about competitors. I talk about, I don't shill. You're there the idea was to go to educate. And if I go to a session, it used to be I'd be able to go to a session. If it was a shill session, I could report that and that person would get banned. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember that there were sessions that were done like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
At Podcast Movement that turned into shill sessions, and there was, those people were banned from coming to Podcast Movement again.
So,
but that certainly that's not the ethic anymore.
So, Chris, if you've been listening, we are looking forward to Podfest in January. We're looking forward to come and to be there. And you have a golden opportunity, my friend, here to continue the narrative that Podfest is a creator conference, and there's not going to be any private Spotify room, and there's not going to be a private Libsyn room, and there's not going to be a private, whatever else has a room with a gatekeeper with the rope yarn, and if you're not on a list, you can't get into it.
Right.
So we will be happy to come down there and be with you at that show. So there's a huge opportunity here for something or someone to up their game in an incredibly big way.
Well, it's got to be affordable. It's got to be easy to get to. It's got to have more of a community focus, not so much business focus, and really focus on trying to help creators be successful. And I think, and that's at a grassroots level, not at the 65-person team level as much. Right. It's okay to address that market if you can, but I think Chris does a good job of having that as kind of like its own separate kind of track that appeals to just those people.
But even the people in the pro track or whatever it is, they still, because I've spoken to that group before, the majority of them are hardworking, independent content creators. They're growing their show. Normal
content creators, right? And then I'm starting to work on the Hall of Fame, which is coming back. So it's shaping up to be more of an independent organization to some degree, but also with very close ties to Podfest. So it's going to be that's about all I can say about it right now, but there's changes going on there too.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, if Dan and Jared, you guys are still here, if you've even listened to this creator event, please, let's think about making it creator friendly. When we go back to Dallas, let's have some potential to
Oh, and Chicago too. It's coming up
Chicago's
next.
again. Chicago. I expect Chicago to be an industry event.
Yeah, but what's the distinction anymore? I don't see a
Well,
distinction.
that's the problem. There is no distinction. As a matter of fact, someone in my Facebook comment got them mixed up. They thought the summer event was the industry event and LA was the creator event. I said, no, it's the opposite. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the same event that just happens every 6 months
Yeah.
now. So,
Which, for me at this point, that's going to become challenging. So I'll have to make a decision in Chicago. Do we just go one time a year and then come to the event and, work out of our backpack,
yeah, right.
have meetings like, at tables and stuff instead of, maybe have an afternoon beer event at a bar nearby or something. It's, that.
We can always have was it a brain date and a meetup?
Yeah, the brain date stuff was interesting. And I know one individual that had a brain date almost every hour. He didn't buy a booth. He just, arranged a bunch of brain dates and promoted the living crap out of them and did very, very well with the brain dates. So, the thing about
That'd be a
that
good
is
approach.
you open a can of worms then. So what happens when all of a sudden your brain date space is fuller than your exhibit space?
Right. Well, yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that the maximum capacity of a brain date is probably like maybe 6 or 7 people
But
at
if
a
you
time.
did one every hour or every couple of hours or
That can
three
add
a
up.
day, yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just make a new podcast creator, start up
And
kind of brain date.
and then of course you got to attract people to brain date too. So, but I don't think they do brain date at I don't remember
Oh,
them doing it at LA. Maybe they did, and maybe I missed it.
oh, the Evolutions
Yeah,
event. Yeah, I don't know what that name Evolutions means anymore. Do you?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure
There's
that
no
it has any
and
significant meaning
and there
to it
was
anymore.
no distinction. It felt like, as a matter of fact, it felt again. It just felt, and I wasn't the only one. People said it just felt different. Um, the thing I like about Podfest is, man, people are excited to be there. They're gun ho. There's energy in the air.
Yeah.
People seeking information. So it's the 90% that was not at Podcast Movement. That is for sure. Because the 10% that was at Podcast Movement will not go to Podfest. A few will. A few.
And some of the people that go to Podfest won't go to Podcast Movement either.
That's true. Yeah,
The,
my
the other interesting thing that we saw at Podcast Movement on the floor was the size of the Daily Wire booth.
well, the Daily Wire booth had no Daily Wire people. It had security at the Daily Wire booth.
Yeah.
There was no staff. There was like maybe someone there to hand out papers or something, and popcorn, and what was the other thing they were serving?
I think it was mainly popcorn,
Yeah,
but like merch and
should have
merch and stuff like
been
that.
tequila shots. To be honest with you, I could have used one Thursday.
Yeah, but they did have staff there. I talked to the guy there. They did have staff there. It's just that the staff wasn't manning the booth.
Oh,
It was the security detail.
so
that
the staff
manning
was
the
in a
booth.
private meeting room.
Well, they were off at meetings and doing.
Well,
doing stuff
what
on
was
their-
ironic is Daily Wire is on the floor after what happened a couple of years ago. So, it is telling. It isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, I think the most shocking thing was the fact that they had a security detail
Right. Well,
manning the actual booth with, Daily Wire shirts and stuff. Right.
yeah, considering historical stuff and what's going on in the country, probably they planned for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, there is a story to be told about them. Right.
Those that have been here long enough have heard it all.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not complaining. Shows come and go. There are ebb and tides to shows. Well,
Yeah,
NAB ebbs and flows. Different shows have ebbs and flows. And, as long as the flow doesn't continue to go south and comes back north and grows, then it's okay. But we cannot live on our laurels anymore and guarantee that there will be, dollars are important these days. Very important.
Yeah.
Why did I double down? Why did I double down for the podcast show in London? Why did I spend more money? This is the thing that needs to be really why did I spend more money for the podcast show than I'll probably spend for 2 shows at Podcast Movement last year? Why did I? Why did I dig deep? There's a reason.
That's a newer, more potential market.
It is a market. I got more potential business. I came home with this much, a bucket full of follow-up that's still churning business. I'm still generating business from that show. I'm still signing clients and networks, and I'm still doing business. And how many months ago was that? It was in May, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll see how long takes me to get through. Well, again, the proof will be it's my job once I get home to convert business. It's not any show's job to do that. That's my job. But if the people aren't there to talk about, or talk to, then again, we're just there waving the flag saying, hey, we're in business. Thank you for business. Give them your pin and everything else that goes on along with that. So.
Yeah. All right. Well,
we went long. I thought this show might be 3 hours today. It's not going to go 3 hours. We're going to go almost 2. Did we entertain everyone? Did we keep you leaned in for the whole hour and 49 minutes so far? You guys are still, a number of people are still hanging on YouTube, so that's good. We got a few people on.
Todd, we're not both stand-up comedians, so I don't know that we've kept everybody enthralled.
Oh, I think we've kept them entertained. You have to keep them entertained. Okay, so this is how you do it. Podcast fans, got milk? Got podcast? You need to start promoting the values of podcasting in whichever way you can. I did task my PR agency with work on trying to come up with something. We'll see. And whatever we come up with, we will give to the world to play around with. Will it take off? Who knows? But I did spend budget, say, go come up with something. And we'll see what we come up with.
Podcast.
The what?
Got podcast.
Yeah, we'll see. We don't want to be total nerds and copy that way. But if you have ideas, on a Got Milk campaign for podcasting, drop me a line if you're willing to donate on Mastodon. And you'll find me back here next week in the same chair. Rob?
All right.
Rob, you want to do your sign off?
Oh.
Maybe you missed my...
Oh, yeah, you cut out on.
Oh, I did. Okay, go ahead.
So I can be found on X as well at Rob Greenlee, and if you want to go to robgreenlee.com, you can see all my podcasts and video shows that I'm doing. I do a live show on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern called Podcast Tips, and I've been doing. I think I'm on episode 38 of that series, Todd, and so that's the best way to reach out to me if you want to send me an email. If you have comments or questions or something like that would contribute to the show, send it to Rob Greenlee, 2 E's on the end, at gmail.com.
All right, everybody, thanks for being here. We'll be back at the same time next week. Those who've been with us live and lit, thank you so much. Thanks for the streaming sats. For those of you that were streaming on a modern podcast app at podcastapps.com. And really, we want to hear what you think. Drop us a line.
Yes, we do.